Multiplying fractions. So if we look at a multiplication involving whole numbers, such as 12 times 3, we could think of this as meaning 12 added to itself 3 times, or 12 plus 12 plus 12, which would all add up to 36. We could represent this as a picture by making one block represent 12 and then having 3 blocks, and in total it all adds up to 36. Now, when we do fractions, the thing to remember about what multiplying by a fraction means is the times means of. So 12 times a half we'll think of as a half of 12. So let's look at a half of 12. I know I've flipped it round. Think of a block of 12 and then we take half of that, which would be 6. Another way to look at that is by asking what number added to itself twice gives you 12. Well, 6 plus 6 gives you 12. Let's look at these bar models side by side. Again, 12 at the top is just 12, or 12 times 1. Underneath, we've got 12 times 3. So this is 12 plus 12 plus 12, which all adds up to 36. Underneath, we've got 12 times a half. So what number added to itself twice gives you 12? That would be 6. Let's look at a few more. So let's look at 12 times a quarter. This is a quarter of 12. So what number, when you add it to itself 4 times, gives you 12? Well, that would be 3. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 adds up to 12. And one more, 12 times 1/3 is 12 divided by 3, which this time is 4. 4 plus 4 plus 4 is 12. Something like 12 times 2/3. Well, we know 12 times 1/3 would be 4, so 1 of 3 equal parts. If we do 12 times 2/3, we still have 3 equal parts of 12, but this time we count 2 of them, so that's 2/3. 1/3 is 4, which means 2/3 is going to be 8. 12 divided by 3 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. You can see that we divided by 3 and multiplied by 2. So the rule in general is you divide by the bottom, you times by the top. Let's try a few more. Are you ready? 8 times 3/4 would be 8 divided by 4 times by 3. Let's look at the next one before we get to the answer. 36 times 7/9 would be 36 divided by 9 times 7. And then 24 times 5/4. Now notice the 5 is on the top. That's 24 divided by 4 times 5. So the answers would be 2 times 3, which would be 6. 4 times 7, 28. And 6 times 5, 30. This next bit is really going to test your understanding of fractions. Ready? A half times a third. We'll think of this as a third of a half. I know I flipped the order, but I'm trying to be consistent with whole numbers. Here's an example with a whole number. 12 times a third. So that means again we've divided 12 into 3 equal parts and we take one of them. So what times 3 gives 4? What gives 12 is 4. A third of a half. So we'll start with a half. So this entire green rectangle represents number 1, and then we'll take half of it. Now we take 1/3 of the half, which means we divide the half into 3 equal parts, and we'll take one of them. The question we need to ask now is what fraction is shaded yellow? And it has to be of the entire green rectangle. So to help us see this, let's take the other half as well and divide that into 3 equal parts. And now we've got 6 equal parts of the big green rectangle, of which we have highlighted 1. That means the answer is 1/6. All of these are 1/6. Here's a slightly different way to look at it, which people tend to like, that rather than a rectangle, we'll do it with a circle instead. 2 equal parts, each one is a half, then we take one of the halves, divide into 3 equal parts. The fraction of the original circle is 1/6, which I find a hard word to say. So a quick check if you can manage this. Can you do them? So let's see the answers. 1/7 times 1/3 would be 1/21. I think you say 1/21, not 1/21. 1/5 times 1/9 would be 1/45, and 1/6 times 1/6 would be 1/36. So how are we getting on so far? We are gradually getting more difficult with this. Now before we get on to harder fractions multiplied together, we are going to just look at a slightly different way of drawing the picture to represent the multiplication. So if we said 1/3 times 1/2, remember we're saying that's half of a third. So we'll start with thirds, 3 equal parts, and then we're going to divide them by 2 by splitting across horizontally the other way. So we have 3 columns, 2 rows. And then when we take the half, we're just going to take one of the halves. And you can see there that overall we've got 6 equal parts, and only one of them is included in our answer. So the answer is 1/6. Let's do this again one more time. So 1/5 times 1/3. Now this time I've put the thirds in rows, and we're going to take the fifths in columns. So 5 equal columns, and then we'll see how many parts in total we end up with. You can see in total we've got 5 times 3, 15 equal parts, and we're only including one of them. So the answer is 1/15. 1/15. Here's the hardest type of multiplying fractions that we'll get to in this video. So here we have fractions where the top number is not a 1. If that was 1/7 and 1/5, we would call those unit fractions. They're not, so we'll call them non-unit fractions. So we're going to start with this big rectangle, and first of all get our 2/7. So 7 equal parts, and we'll take 2 of those parts, and that is 2/7. 3/5 we're going to do horizontally. Now if we put in horizontal lines to divide this into fifths, we'll split each one of those sevenths into 5 equal parts. So that it'll look like this. And we've got to think how many of these parts we're going to end up with. Well, on the columns, we've got 2/7, and on the rows, we've got 3/5. So that highlighted region is our answer. In total, we've got 35 parts equal. All these small rectangles are the same size. And we can see that by doing 7 times 5. The number of parts we've got is 6, and that comes from doing 2 times 3. So our answer is 6 35ths. 6 35ths. And the rule to remember is you multiply the tops and you multiply the bottoms. So, quick check. Pause the video if you need to. 7/9 times 2/3, we would do 7 times 2 and 9 times 3. So the answer would be 14/27. The next one would be 25 42nds. And this third one, first we'll do 3 times 2, get 6. And then 5 times 3 is 15. So looks like 6/15. But you might have known you had to simplify. So we can divide both of those numbers by 3. They're both in the 3 times table. 6 divided by 3 would be 2, and 15 divided by 3 would be 5. So the answer is actually 2/5. Now there is another trick you could have done to do that one if you wanted to. We can simplify even before we multiply. So we can see we have a 3 on the top and a 3 on the bottom. Divide the 3 and the 3 by 3 to get 1 and 1. So it becomes 1/5 times 2 wholes, if you want to say that. And so 1 times 2 is 2. 5 times 1 is 5. In this case, either way is probably equally difficult or easy. So before we finish, we'll look at a possible different way to explain why we multiply fractions in the way we do. And you're welcome to skip this part of the video if you want to. Now I think if you have a picture that shows you something, there's a chance it's a trick. You're being bamboozled. Now in this case you're not, but you still might think, that picture just shows me one sum, what about other sums? And what if you're blind? Can you really rely on a picture to show something's true? So we'll look at a slightly different, some slightly different ideas for why this might work. So we're just going to do this for one calculation, although you can try and adapt these ideas to other calculations if you want. So 3/5 of a half. Well, 3/5 times a half, and we'll think of that as a half of 3/5. So we'll start with the 3/5. So imagine that long rectangle is 1, and we take 3/5 of it. So imagine that's a block of cheese. We've got 3/5 of the block of cheese. We're going to share it between 2 mice. Well, how can we do that? Because one mice could get 2/5. The other could get 1/5, that wouldn't work. So there's an odd number. How can you share them in 2? So the way we could do this is take each fifth separately. Now in a way that's what we would do if we split horizontally into halves. We would split each fifth into half. But we'll do it vertically in a diagram. So copy the diagram again, and I'm going to show here that we're taking a half of each fifth separately. So it's a half of a fifth and a fifth and a fifth, which is the same as a half of a fifth plus a half of a fifth plus a half of a fifth. And the fundamental principle here is it does not matter in which order you add or multiply. We could add a fifth plus a fifth plus a fifth and then multiply by a half, or we could multiply each fifth by half first and then add them together. So saying that again, multiplying and addition we could do in either order, and that's called the distributive law. Distributive law. So hopefully you know half of 1/5 is a tenth. So we get a tenth on that fifth. The next fifth we get a tenth again, and on the third fifth we also get a tenth. So each mouse gets 3/10. A tenth plus a tenth plus a tenth is 3/10. And that's our answer. So how do you feel about multiplying fractions? Well, fractions definitely is a harder topic, and the challenge you'll find is when you start other operations as well, like addition, subtraction, division, that it gets harder to keep all of these straight in your head. So just remember, you will fall to your level of preparation, not rise to the occasion. Should you think about explanations like the distributive law when you're doing calculations with fractions? Probably not. I would say the main important thing is to know how to do the procedures. And if you're interested in looking at an explanation of why things work the way they do, then that's great.